The IPG study has been on for 6 years, and having tracked consumer decision making for so long, would you say there's a significant change in the buying decisions from a decade ago to now?
We've seen the changes on several fronts. We've seen the changes in terms of how people are valuing information. Around the world, people are increasingly, every year, valuing product information more and more. It provides them more and more confidence and satisfaction with the products, which is wonderful. We're also seeing that people are getting a lot more joy out of learning about products. India is, I think, second highest in the world on that regard. That joy often translates to advocacy. These people are showing an increased interest in actually advocating for products. But what we're seeing as well is this interest and rush to take in information and enjoy information and value information is running into this increased interest and demand really for trusted information. We know in India, people here are very concerned about getting trusted information, and India actually is the highest in the world when it comes to people relying on brand names that they trust in order to proceed further with a product. So really dramatic changes around the world.
How do you compare the habits and behavioral patterns of the Indian consumer with the BRIC countries or other bigger economies like the US and the UK?
There's a great culture in learning, and obviously in this country, which is a wonderful accolade for India. And that culture and interest in learning manifests itself in a culture of wanting to share that learning with friends, which is wonderful for marketing and marketing communications people. And the other, I think, major point of distinction for Indian people is their willingness and desire and interest in finding brand names as great representatives and surrogates, if you will, for brand trust, which says to us as marketing people that we need to work very hard to establish strong brand name reputation and strong brand name affinity and positive feelings.
And would you say brand names are still relevant?
Enormously so. And actually we saw this particularly in India, where in India consumers here, more so than any other place in the world, are relying more and more on brand names and brand reputation. Why is that? Because as consumers are being challenged, are challenging marketers for trusted information, they're relying on brands and brand name reputation to be a surrogate, if you will, or a representative of that trust.
We've seen categories like mobile phones, for instance, where consumers have embraced lesser-known brands, let's say like a Xiaomi, for instance. Whereas in some categories, they take time to embrace a lesser-known brand. What do you think is the reason behind this?
With brands like Xiaomi, a lot of it's price. They're a very strong marketer, and they've been able to come to the market with a very low price point and bring in millions of new people, which is wonderful. Again, it's all about really democratizing information, and I think you'll continue to see that, and it's a wonderful thing for us as marketers.
Can you highlight specific insights that are dramatically more different, say in a country like US?
It's interesting when you look at the data for India, Brazil, and China. They're very different. That cluster of countries is very different than the US and for the UK. And one of the questions that we keep asking ourselves is, as this gap separates in terms of joy from learning, advocacy, interest in new product information, greater value from product information, will this gap continue to increase, or will over time, as the Indian consumer and the Chinese and the Brazilian consumer, as they become more accustomed to living in a commercial world and entering in middle class, which these countries are doing quite aggressively, will they start to equalize with the US?
Is an alert customer the result of growing awareness levels caused by electronic media? For instance, in India, somebody staying in Tier 2 or Tier 3 has the same level of awareness as somebody living in the big cities.
That really was the genesis of our research, saying that with the explosion of the internet and the availability of more and more product information, often through electronic means, people are just getting a lot more information in, and our question was, to what extent are they enjoying it and able to process it? When we started the research back in 2009, our hypothesis was that all this information coming at people was just going to overwhelm them, that they wouldn't know what to do with it, and that they'd find it frustrating and confusing. And what we learned very, very early on, to our surprise, was that people actually have learned to cope quite well with all the information.
And has television, according to you, been the great equalizer, or is it the mobile phone?
We see a lot of cultures that are actually almost jumping over the laptop and going right from television, radio, and print, right to mobile. It obviously, with mobile phones, provides people immediate, ready, and easy, and relatively inexpensive access to lots of product information. I mean, I live off of mine. I'm sure you live off of yours.
And how much do you think the Indian consumer gets influenced by word of mouth, social media pressure, and advertising?
The Indian consumer responds very, very well to social media and to word of mouth advertising around the world. Face-to-face advertising, friends and family communication is clearly the most powerful form of communication. That's why the marketing world enjoys, or actually is thrilled that consumers are willing to learn more and want to advocate more, because that's a very powerful channel for us. So how do we tap into that? And social media is can be a very good vehicle for us to tap into that desire to advocate.
Even as mobile phones get ubiquitous and social media becomes more and more influential, but it is still the mass media which is the most influential. So when do you see the mass media diminishing in value?
Mass media will always have value. I remember, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, people were saying the internet will lead to the death of television. The internet will lead to the death of radio advertising and print advertising. Clearly that's not the case. When people are spending in the US upwards of $5 million for a 30-second commercial in the Super Bowl, TV is not dead. And for many brands, not all brands, but for many brands, TV fulfills a very, very strong role in terms of creating a high quality image and an emotional connection that often you can't get through the internet.
Well, this was great. Thank you so much for joining us, and it was a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you.